Okay, super. Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to present this afternoon. It may not be clear here, I'm in the Forest Management branch, and I'm in the new Ministry of Alberta Agriculture and Forestry. We actually become this ministry on Monday of next week. The transition is apparently taking place on Monday. The magic button will be pushed then. So this is what I'm covering today, a few items around the standards that I administer, and they are the Alberta Forest Genetic Resource Management and Conservation Standards. I will refer to these as the standards for the rest of the talk, I hope, but the acronym you will see in the presentation is FGRMS. Very unfortunate acronym, but that is what it is, FGRMS. That I try to say standards. So I'll go over the purpose of the standards. I'll talk about operational considerations with respect to reclamation work, and close if there's time, and I believe I've left enough time to talk about a little bit of seed research that we have underway. So I just wanted to talk a little bit, though, before I progress on what I mean by the word seed. I'm using the word seed as a very collective term. It is a term used for all propagation, propagules, propagation-type materials. So that can include cutting materials, for example. Often we use cuttings for, or whip material for willows and poplars. So when I use the word seed, or if I use the word materials, that is what I'm referring to. And I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the work that I will talk about my work unit, just one slide on it. You will hear the word tree improvement, and I wanted to clarify something about the word tree improvement. This does not mean genetically modified organisms. When we do tree improvement work, we are talking about common garden type breeding. So if you think about it in the spring, it's that, if you're in your garden, it's that spring fling that occurs where there's pollen flying everywhere, beautiful, lovely flowers. Even trees do have flowers, and that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about tree improvement. We're doing just typical breeding work with our materials, our tree materials. So the standards themselves, they have a history and a background, and I just wanted to cover that here, just one slide only. These standards were developed through extensive consultation with geneticists and other scientific staff and management professionals. As you can see on the slide, the original formation of them took place in 2003. They actually had a different title back then. Nonetheless, they are at the point where they are FGRMS, or standards, that I refer to them as. And they've undergone, since 2003, revisions, and we're currently in another cycle of revisions. We're actually nearing the close of that. We've undertaken undergone development of the revisions. We've undergone consultation, and we're nearing the close of that work in this year, 2016. The whole point of these standards, they are, first of all, policy-based material or information, and they were developed to maintain the genetic integrity, health, and productivity of Alberta's wild and managed forests. And these standards have been used for the management of forest genetic resources in reforestation and tree improvement activities on public lands in this province. So I'll just go over a little bit about what the standards cover. And again, this is actually, I knew this was a fairly broad audience, so I apologize if this is a little too basic for some people. If you're familiar with it, it will be. What these standards cover, I'll just give you the 4 sections of what the standards are. The first section is materials collection, handling, registration, and storage. And examples in this section are that the seed is registered, and it is registered with us, the Alberta Tree Improvement and Seed Centre, so it's registered with the province. It also identifies seed collection standards on public land, so in other words, it is a regulated activity. The second section is and I just realized this is kind of a carryover from forestry. It's green area deployment, but consider it public land deployment. and it's, as you can imagine, the deployment or use of planting of registered materials. The third and fourth section I won't cover here today. These are both sections with respect to the tree improvement activities. So they guide the breeding, testing, and verification work that we do in tree improvement, and they also cover the production of those materials. And you may have heard the term seed orchards, so that's what the fourth section covers off, is the sort of the development and standards for seed orchards. Oh, and I just wanted to explain a little bit about the maps. This covers the public land deployment concepts. These maps, the one on your far left is, as it says there, it shows or demonstrates seed zones in this province. There are 90 of them, and they are used for wild seed, and that means all woody species. In the past, it has been for tree species, but is now with the development, or the revisions, I should say, of these new standards, it now applies to all woody species. And then the other two maps, again, I won't get into, but they just demonstrate areas of deployment for tree improved materials for different species, so white spruce in the middle, and for lodgepole pine and jack pine on the far right. So again, continuing on the purpose of the standards, I've mentioned that we're undergoing revisions. With the ongoing industrial development and the use of appropriate plant genetic materials in reclamation, it's essential for the maintenance, is essential for the maintenance of ecosystem function and biological diversity. So one of the outcomes, as I've mentioned, of the review that we've undertaken is to revise the standards and have them now apply to all woody species. They've already been applied to reforestation, but it now includes for reclamation projects on public land, and that's a really key point here. These are public land standards. I'll just spend this one slide introducing the activities that we undertake at the center that I am located at. I'm located in Smoky Lake, and we have an extensive provincial tree improvement program. I'm not going to delve into all of these pictures, but it just gives you a sense. We have had trials underway for decades now, as evidenced by some of the pictures on the upper left. These are provenance trials of different tree species. We also do clone banking, so when we do make those selections of materials that we want to put into a tree improvement program, we have to bank that material because we don't know if we want to go back to that particular individual tree, if it will still be there. So we take materials and we clone it and we put it into a bank. Other activities include progeny testing. So again, I've already mentioned the tree breeding work that we do. We then take the progeny and put it into trials. We do seed research, and of course we do the production orchards, which that's white spruce flower, and you can see the multiple cones. That's what we like to see, and that's our goal, is to have good production, quality material of improved materials. And the bottom right picture, that's actually, we do have responsibilities around conservation. That is white bark pine seed, and you can see it's a happy seed. We have a seed lab that is really doing outstanding work with white bark pine and limber pine, which are now a species that are protected under species at risk. And on top of all of that, of course, we develop and administer the standards that I'm speaking about today, and we are a regulator of those standards. So I'm just going to cover a few steps. I appreciated the detailed flow chart that Deborah just had. I wasn't sure about the audience knowledge and so on, so I tried to elevate the steps. So this is quite a high level of the steps. There's actually 2 slides, so this is one half of the process that one would go through with respect to seed for, reforestation, for revegetating on public land. Preparation work, your planning work that goes on in advance of any collections, applying, and then making your application to one of the forestry offices. We've actually now, with the change in ministries, we've now gone back to the 10, maybe not original, but the 10 forestry offices that have existed in the past. So the application is made. You receive authorization to collect, and you undertake your collection. You follow the standards with respect to diversity requirements and distance. There's standards around, just collections, details. They differ for different species. They also differ for the different, you can have different approaches to your collections. They can be within an entire seed zone, but that changes its deployment capability, or you can do point collections. And again, I'm not going into delving into those details, but they are available in the standards, and of course we're available to talk about them at the Alberta Tree Improvement and Seed Centre. There is one clause, though, that I wanted to point out to you. Within collection, there's kind of a bypass route. There's an ability to collect material and use it immediately on site. So you use it, you bypass the registration, the transportation, the registration, the storage, and everything else. This is typically used for cuttings. But I had an interesting example during the consultation period where one speculated that one might take, say, pine cones and distribute them on a reclamation site and just leaving the cones to, fall apart, break apart, and the seed germinate. And absolutely that falls into this particular standard. So following that, if you haven't gone that route, if you're doing an actual collection that you do want to have stored, cleaned, stored, etc., registered, you continue on through this flow chart for transportation. You complete a seed registration request. This actually, I've got in brackets here, it supports transportation. I should have added, and of course it supports registration too. This is actually a clause that we're required to have within the timber management regulations, and that is that the province must provide authorization for transportation. And so that is how we do it, by having a seed registration request, and embedded in that is your authorization to transport materials, your collected materials. So it's transported to an approved processing facility. And then the remaining steps are the processing of seed, and we don't, I should mention, we don't do that at the Alberta Tree Improvement and Seed Centre. There is a registered facility right next to us in Smoky Lake, the Smoky Lake Forest Nursery. I've pointed out here within the processing, seed moisture must be to FGRMS specifications. The reason I've done this is there was a misunderstanding that came to light during the consultation period, and that is that people were concerned, and rightly so, that seed gets consumed when it's tested. So you can imagine if one is doing germination tests and so on, you're destroying or using this incredibly valuable seed. And so all that the province requires is seed moisture. There's new techniques available nowadays where there's not destruction of the material. It's a moisture content type of process, but it doesn't destroy the material. I'm not aware of anywhere in Canada using this particular or identifying this as an acceptable standard. I believe Quebec is interested, but we have clearly identified it, and I'm very pleased with that aspect of our standards. And then on to registration and storage. The registration does occur at the center that I work at, and we do have a storage facility with that registered material. And then there's the withdrawal of the seed for your seed needs, and of course that falls into the deployments side of things, where you're using things within the seed zones. There is an ability to ask or request variances around the deployment, so that does exist. I wasn't sure if I would have time, but I don't, for the seed research. We do have a lab. We have 2 staff in this lab, and this is a germinating hazelnut, in case anybody doesn't know about it. So I guess this is basically my close. Why are we doing this? Why are we regulating this? Why do we set standards for seed use? Why do we register seed lots? Why do we ask proponents to seek authorization before collecting seed on public land? Why do we conduct seed research? And it's because we operate on public land. We are the stewards on behalf of the public. We are representing the public's interest. And we need these plant materials in the forest to be diverse, resilient now, and to be present in the future. And this is my last slide. Thank you very much. I'll just mention that we are happy to discuss the standards, we and the staff at the Tree Improvement Center. We'll discuss the standards. We are happy to talk about our research. You're welcome to have tours at our facility. We host tours and provide any clarification that you require on seed matters. And thank you very much.